The 80s had the General. The 90s had John Gilligan. In the noughties, it was the reign of Martin Marlowe Hyland. His was a familiar path with success and power, and then the recklessness. He had to go, because with him, an innocent young man doing an honest day's work died. Crime World presents Caught in the Crossfire, the unsolved murders of coke kingpin Marlowe Hyland and innocent Anthony Campbell. Available now on all podcast platforms. You were actually really mean to me last night.
Well, so explain the context of what I did.
Well, I sort of threw my toys out of my pram and said I was leaving, I was walking away, I was giving up. And you went initially like, oh, and then you went, fine, it's grand, it's absolutely fine.
So but you didn't actually resign. This is a dream you've had, isn't it? So put that in the context.
Do you ever wake up and somebody's done something to you in your dream and you're still annoyed at them?
No, because
like when I saw you today, I was like,
yeah, he thinks he's great, does he? So no, I don't do that, Nicola.
I'm going to go on a seven run.
You do that.
Have you never done that?
I have never done that. I would never hold somebody else responsible for what I dreamed of them, since they have no input into it.
It's actually a bit screwed up that you're in my dream at all, isn't it? But you didn't look like yourself.
No, what? Even more handsome.
You just look like a totally different person. Anyway, so that's enough of that.
So you're not leaving Crime World?
No. And
if you did leave Crime World, I'd be absolutely crying and bawling.
Yeah, you'd be absolutely. You'd be chasing me down the road, throwing millions and millions of pounds at me and everything. So no, I'm not. So we're here for the moment.
And I'm not responsible for what you dream. I'd also like to.
Now, Jonathan Dowdall is still languishing in prison after the whole sorry debacle of the Regency trial and his failed bid to give evidence to help convict Gerry The Monk Hutch of murder. But we had a story at the weekend that his house there on the Navan Road is going up for sale, sort of sparking interest in the fact that he's due out over the next while and he's on the witness protection programme, so he will be relocated.
Yeah.
And obviously the sale of the house is something that the state do if somebody is an owner of a property, to help them relocate supposedly to somewhere of the same value as that. But it's like quite a lot of money, that house.
Yeah, it's actually it's a lovely home, like no doubt about it. It's up for sale for 795,000.
Yeah. Did things go above the that at the moment?
Look, they do.
The property market like?
The property market, I don't know. The property market is still pretty healthy, I think, So
to explain for anybody listening in the country, sometimes like, especially with Dublin prices, if a property is for sale at 795, is it?
Yeah.
795. I mean, the owner might be looking for an extra 50.
Yeah.
Depending on where the market is at the time. But like,
I think the average recently enough was, if it's something goes on sale, you could get up to on average of 10% more. So 800,000, this house is roughly up for, you might get another 70, 80,000.
And this is a semi-D on the Navan Road, which is a road, sort of a route into the city centre, which is a really good address.
Yeah.
And it's on the north side. It's probably, would it be a 20-minute walk from the city centre?
It'd be
Navan
longer
Road?
than that.
Would it?
Yeah, it would be longer than that.
It's a big long road, of course.
It's a big long road.
Drive down it, you don't notice.
Yeah.
But it has been really expensively refurbished. Now, I think I have to say that the Dowdalls should have realised that grey has had its day.
Grey's had its day.
Grey's had its day. Do you know that? That's no longer.
It's in better condition than my own in home, so I'm not going to judge. But I did not enjoy the leather. The red leather.
Oh no, that is
couches.
Absolutely gross.
Yeah.
Up in the attic in this weird kind of man den.
Yeah.
And they're bright red leather.
Yeah.
With sort of black surrounds on them. And that room would make me feel physically ill.
Yeah.
The kitchen is just definitely costs a lot of money, I would say.
Yeah. No, look.
But
isn't
everyone's style.
No.
A lot of grey.
No.
Grey and white's gone.
Is it?
Yeah, it's gone. It's all gone.
Yeah.
But
so it's the back garden really that like you really see the man's personality, I think, in it to an extent.
Yeah, it's weird.
So like in the the brochure selling the home on the property website, it describes the kind of back garden as an oriental inspired haven, perfect for entertaining or a relaxing escape. And it's kind of, I think there's a couple of statues of the Buddha or something like that. And then you go through the garden, which is, you come into a shed area, I suppose, and there's this massive fish pond where Jonathan Dowdall kept his oriental fish, is how we describe it.
I'd say it's a kind of more a pergola rather than a shed area.
I don't have a clue what a pergola is.
So it's quite a large sort of outdoor fish pond.
Yeah.
As such, rectangular in shape.
Yeah, I think it's covered.
Covering it is a pergola, which would be a wall-less structure.
Yeah.
That is supposed to be sort of for, for shade in very hot countries, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, it's a big...
really need pergolas here.
One does not need a pergola.
Would be would be handier in Ireland.
So it's obviously costs a lot of money.
Oh, yeah.
It costs a huge amount to maintain something like that. He had koi, I think, was the fish that he
which
primarily
are expensive too.
Expensive fish, right? So all of that, and it's kind of an like a Japanese kind of garden feel to it, I suppose, overall.
Yeah.
And then bizarrely, of course, like that's one part of the home, but the home has become famous in of its own right, hasn't it?
It has.
For a very unrelaxed and not Oriental inspired
dinner party. It turned into a torture session, which we heard all about at the Regency Hotel, and of course, which Jonathan Dowdall was serving a sentence for his role in when he was charged himself with the murder of David Byrne, and that charge later dropped when he agreed to go state witness. But there is, before we get on to that, there is another fish tank in the house somewhere with a chair jammed up to it that you...
Yeah, it looks. I'm not really sure where that is, but it's a giant fish tank. It's in the downstairs. It's maybe an annex to the kitchen or something like that. So fish.
I've never
is
got
thing.
the point of fish or keeping fish or it's a bit like, isn't there one of the crime dramas? Is it Kin and your man has all this?
Yeah, I don't.
Fish and these sort of lizards and shit in cages in tanks not in cages.
Yeah,
imagine a fish in a cage. Wouldn't last too long. So it's a bit of an odd sort of hobby.
No, is it? No, are you gonna? Yeah, the fish community are going to be.
Please, fish community, don't come on and say.
Well, let's put it this way, right? It's an unusual hobby for a man who also waterboards people, if you know what I mean. Yeah. So in of itself, it's not that unusual, but it's just unusual that somebody like Jonathan Dowdall, and again, the whole thing like kind of shows like he's obviously developed this kind of Buddha-like calm back garden. Yeah. That's this public-facing side to him, and then there's the other side to him, which is the complete opposite, and that's sums up Jonathan Dowdall, isn't it? Like he's an absolutely bizarre personality operating on both ends of the spectrum, a public representative, but also a criminal, just a confidant of gangland figures, but also a police informer. Yeah. Yeah.
And seen as a fool. Like, do you know, the outside of that house always, because the first time Jonathan Dowdall came on our radar when it came to criminality was in the aftermath of the Regency Hotel, when some social media started emanating from the Kinahan organised crime group. And he was named as one of the people who had been involved in the Regency Hotel attack. Now, at the time, I remember calling to the house and being very impressed by the level of sort of work, I suppose, had been done to it. Now, I'm only talking about the outside of the house. Yeah. There was electric gates, there was an electric garage, there was new windows, which looked quite... I don't know whether they were bullet resistant, but they looked very high end. Cars in the drive were high end. Yeah. There was a kind of a new enough Mini, there was a BMW from memory, and a Jeep. This looked like the house of somebody who was doing really, really well. Yeah. And now that we can go in behind the whole door, we can see that is reflected throughout the house, that sort of the spend and into the back garden, right?
Yeah.
So he was asked a number of times about his wealth, his ability to own this house when he was in the witness box. And he put it down to hard work.
Yeah.
He put it down to buying his first home when he was in his 20s and selling it and upgrading.
Yeah.
And he had set up this electrics business, which was obviously doing pretty well.
Yeah.
But he had really kind of elevated himself in a way that a lot of people his age, even through hard work, hadn't been afforded to do because, I suppose, of the property crash, which affected a lot of people around his age group.
Yeah, I think he even mentioned a compo claim helping him get started and all of this. So he was cross-examined and he stuck to his guns, let's put it that way. No pun intended, but this is all legitimate. But I mean, he certainly, like, he was an electrician, and he did have people working for him. But yeah, he managed to rise rapidly up the ladder and live in a, luxury, whether you like the colour scheme or not. It's definitely luxury.
Absolutely. And the price tag on it is enormous, in fairness. We get used to these massive price tags on properties in Dublin, but I mean, it is absolutely, if he's to move, look, he more than likely will move to an English language territory, Canada, America, Australia, New Zealand, England.
Yeah.
You'd probably get a lot of bang for your buck there for the kind of money that he's looking at having to pump into a home. But I mean, Dowdall, listen, when you look at that house and you think that a year before the Regency, a man came to basically on the understanding of being interested in buying a motorbike, and was invited to that house for a meal, with Jonathan Dowdall's father Patrick and himself, and ended up in the garage, which we don't see photographs of, tied to a chair and tortured for a significant amount of hours, with an associate of Dowdall's videoing it so as they could keep it for, I presume they wanted to watch it every now and then.
Yeah.
And this man was terrified.
Yeah, I mean, his wrists, chest and legs were tied to the chair with cable ties. And Jonathan Dowdall's father, who was also convicted in relation to it, was heard threatening to pull off Mr. Hurley's, Alex Hurley as he was named in court, pull off his fingers one by one with the pliers. And Dowdall had a balaclava and he could be seen holding a tea towel to the man's face while pouring water over his head. I mean, bizarre, because again, while all of this was going, and it doesn't seem to be based on much of anything, he was also serving county councillor. I mean, wasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he was wrongly accusing Mr. Alex Hurley of trying to rob him, basically, of the bike or diddle him in some way. Even though the bike had gone up for sale. I thought the most unusual part of the whole thing was to invite Hurley for dinner.
Yeah.
What I mean?
They were bizarre.
They were doing a transaction, answering an ad for sale on Dundee or something. Yeah. Went over, saw the motorbike, and then they all got on so well that he was invited back for a meal in the house. But, that's just me. Maybe that happens.
Well, I mean, if you look at it, and it's so bizarre, the whole thing, right? So, that a man of that, as you can see, that considerable wealth, a very privileged position in society, an elected representative, and, to put all of that at risk, not just by doing it, but then recording it, not just recording it, but then keeping it. And of course, it only came to light because as the Regency investigation progressed, we know that Jonathan Dowdall had become a person of interest, let's put it that way, for the Special Detective Unit who were investigating dissident activities, and that they had started to have some intelligence or whatever it was that he was linked to this or could be linked to this.
To the weapons.
And the weapons were discovered, and then the home was raided, Jonathan Dowdall's home, during a search for more weapons or something to do with weapons. They found this USB key with this torture session on it, which had been lying in a drawer.
And of course, throughout the torture session, Dowdall claims to be a senior ranking member of the IRA.
Yeah.
And he threatens Mr. Hurley that, he'll go for his parents as well as himself, and that he'll be killed, and does he not know who he's dealing with, and he's done the wrong thing by trying to pull the wool over the eyes of such a senior ranking figure in the IRA. And of course, as Dowdall is jailed in relation to this after this discovery of this USB key with it, himself and his father are jailed. They get pretty hefty sentences. While in prison, the overarching Regency investigation continues, and all of a sudden, Gerry the Monk Hutch is returned from Spain, extradited to face charges for the murder of David Byrne that day. And also, Dowdall himself is arrested and charged with the murder. So he's in prison. He's kind of nearing the end, or certainly seeing an end in sight of his sentence for the torture. And all of a sudden, bang, he's hit with a murder charge. And I think he probably starts to panic and make some decisions. He has, as we heard during the trial, made a bit of an approach early on when he was initially arrested and quizzed about any role he had in it. He had sort of asked about the witness protection. We had that evidence from one retired detective. But all of a sudden he starts agitating to speak to the investigating officers, saying he has information, and meets with some of them in secret along with his wife. And he tells them a story about Gerry the Monk Hutch, which the Director of Public Prosecutions eventually decides should be heard as evidence against him, and that Jonathan Dowdall can basically plead guilty to a lesser charge. Was his father charged with something more serious? He wasn't facing murder, was he, Patrick? Both of them pleaded
to facilitation.
Facilitation. Both of them pleaded guilty to facilitating the Regency, essentially. Something that they got about 4 years and 2 years for. So he's pleaded guilty to that when the Monk's trial gets underway, and all of a sudden the Monk is in the dock alone. His co-accused is now against him. And obviously the big moment in that trial was when Jonathan Dowdall stood into the dock and started what the criminal underworld and many others would describe as touting, in the dock.
But you can see why, from Jonathan Dowdall's perspective, what the attraction of becoming because it's, becoming a protected witness in the eyes of normal society, but becoming a rat, I suppose, in the eyes of many of the people he would have spent his life surrounded by, not just the criminal figures like the Hutches, but people within the community where he grew up, in the North Inner City. Many people who have no involvement in crime would maybe look down on that. But at the point at which Jonathan Dowdall made that decision, he was still a bit away from finishing his sentence in relation to the torture, probably 1.5 years, 2 years, something along those lines. And at that point, he will be looking, he has this wonderful home to come out to. He has a wife and a family to come out to. He has these assets. He has a trade. He's an electrician. He's able to work as an electrician, presumably anywhere across the world. So he's facing that. That's one option. And the other option is potentially face another 3 decades behind bars for a role in one of the most notorious murders. Because if he had been convicted of that murder, and if Gerry Hutch had been convicted of that murder, they wouldn't have got out in that 16, 17 years. Nearly all of those gangland killings, people are going on longer. And that's the decision he took. And it's like, if you can see, we go back and you mentioned calling into Jonathan Dowdall after he first appeared online, but that was still, those online, mentions of his name, it was still a very small little select few. It was journalists and criminals really who were interested in it. Some would say the line between them is not as big as it might be, but they were the people that were interested. But when was Jonathan Dowdall first named in the public? When he went out and did a big interview with Joe Duffy. I mean, Joe,
after the raids on his home, which were in March.
And at that point...
Just to recall, so the AK-47s used in...
The Regency were discovered in the back of a guy called Shane Rowan's car, who was a known sort of dissident from Donegal. And
basically in the background, the Special Detective Unit and other police had been sort of focused on those weapons. I think they kind of pretty much knew where they were being stored in Dublin, and they were undercover watching Shane Rowan as he made his way down from Donegal.
Yeah.
They knew that Jonathan Dowdall had brought the Monk in the aftermath of the Regency hotel attack to Donegal. Their car had been bugged, and this was an effort basically to get rid of those goddamn weapons. They were red hot. They wanted shot of them. And Dowdall had facilitated a meeting with Hutch with Shane Rowan. They had visited his house or up in where
they had a summit with him,
and they had meetings with other dissidents who we later named in the Sunday World. I think Dowdall was intent on not naming these people in the witness stand, but in actual fact, Justice Tara Burns did name them and identified the new IRA leader, Thomas Ash Mellon, who Jonathan Dowdall had described as brain dead on the tapes. Paul Bosco McCready, a veteran Republican who had been put in touch with Dowdall by Pierce Macaulay. And the third man that we named we identified the man named as Kevin Tyrone O'Neill as the dissident Kevin Murphy. So the three of them had been brought to a roadside for a meeting with Hutch in the dark, and they had got out of the car and met them and had discussions the whole way down. I think what was clear from those tapes was how Hutch was very careful in what he said in the car. Dowdall was non-stop talk and, talked himself into all sorts of trouble, really, or should have, in that car. Those three individuals were known as the three Queen Bees. I think Hutch called them the three Queen Bees, or was it Dowdall? I can't remember. And you got the impression, certainly, the Monk was unimpressed with all of them. I think he sort of discussed how they stank of drink when he went to meet them, and he certainly wasn't giving away anything. So that's what Dowdall had done. I mean, he's in his garage with a guy tied to a chair, and he's telling him he's a leader of the IRA. He's later in the witness stand, and he's describing how, he is the kind of go-between. He sort of is trying to claim he's the peacemaker. He wants this feud to die down. He thinks he has connections that will help.
Yeah. So even despite the fact he's driven Gerry Hutch up there, he's met with all these guys, he's arranged these meetings, he's known, at least, he's had discussions about the movements of the weapons. Despite all of that, and despite knowing that he has done that, and that he has also tortured this guy, and despite knowing all that, he still, goes on Joe Duffy and, pretends that he is sounds outraged. Sounds genuinely outraged that he's targeted. And I remember my own relatives saying, that's terrible what they're doing to that poor man. Because he goes on and he says the house was raided. He's suspected of being a member of the IRA. They were in search of firearms and explosives. And he keeps saying, I don't know why it's a complete shock to me. The first I seen and knew of it was a load of armed guards coming to the house. They didn't burst through the door then and was held at gunpoint in the house. So he gives it the full whack to Joe Duffy.
And in actual fact, we have a little bit of audio from that.
Well, how are you, Jonathan? You're all over the front page of the lot of newspapers today about your house being raided. What happened?
Life is upside down at the moment, Joseph. Tell you the truth. My family are in an awful state. My daughter won't go to work. She won't go to college. My house was raided, and as you say, other than that, I didn't make it public, but the guards did that. They notified the press, as far as I'm aware, and the house was raided under Section 9 as being a suspected member of the IRA, and they were in search of firearms and explosives. And that was the reason why the I don't know why that is. It was a complete shock to me. The first I seen and known of it was a lot of armed guards coming to the house. I just happened to be able to open the door on time, and they didn't burst through the door, and then I was held at gunpoint in the house. I was more than cooperative to the guards. They were looking for an office that we left 3 or 4 years ago, and I told them our office was around the back, and they were there from people. It reported in the media that they were there from yesterday morning, which it wasn't true. They were there from the night before, from 7:45 that night.
Okay.
They told us to get out of the house. I wasn't cautioned or arrested at any point or questioned about anything, and I don't know what it's in relation to, and they wouldn't let me. If I left the room, I was held at gunpoint. So I'm well regarded in the north inner city.
Okay.
I'm not involved in crime.
After that, he sort of, at some point, it's a few weeks later, isn't it? He attempts to go to Dubai, and he's stopped at the airport. It's shortly after, I can't remember the exact time frame, number of days, not a long time. And then he is stopped by Garda. He's taken into custody, and he's questioned again about what he knows about the Regency and what he knows about the Hutches. And again, he, rather than saying no comment, which everybody's entitled to do, he gives long and varied excuses about how he's just a business guy and he just knows Gerry's just a good guy that he knows nothing. Gerry would never say anything to him about the Regency or any of that stuff. Sure, why would he? He's just a businessman. He knows the Hutches, and he only,
He's employed some of the younger Hutches.
Yes. So he gives a whole long spiel about how innocent he is and, how his life is in danger because of social media and the media are picking on him and this is all so unfair. And then I think during the trial it was described as, at some point the guard said to him, well, we do know you're with Gerry Hutch in the car, and, suggested, I think, that there might be recordings, and then he shut up at that point. So that is Jonathan Dowdall.
He's a chancer.
He's a chancer, and he thinks he can talk his way out of anything.
Yeah.
And literally, he has not only not talked himself out of anything, he's talked himself into a load of trouble a load of times.
He has, and of course, having done what he did during the Regency trial, having given that evidence, he sort of landed everybody in it. He landed a lot of the dissidents in the middle of this. He spoke about and named, we were able to scratch down everybody's name that he had told the cops were involved in the Regency. Some of the members of the Hutch family who have passed away have been murdered in actual fact and targeted by the Kinahans, and others who are still alive. And he named a whole lot of them. And he had told the Gardaí that he was so incensed by the way he'd been framed by the Hutch family and organisation that he would give evidence in ongoing trials, and he would just keep basically putting them each one after the other away in prison. But of course, he wasn't believed. He was a bad witness. There wasn't enough evidence against Gerry Hutch. Certainly there wasn't seen to be evidence enough to convict him of murder. I think the judgment sort of suggested that there was evidence maybe to have convicted him of something, but that the only thing that the court were asked to convict him of was murder. And that meant that he was being found not guilty and he was free to walk. But Dowdall, will have enemies everywhere now. But having said that, we go back to the reason this house is sold, and it's to facilitate his exit actually from the witness protection program, because what people don't understand is people don't live on the witness protection program forever. They only live on that program until they give their evidence. They're only protected witnesses until which point they're no longer of use. And I can tell you that Jonathan Dowdall is never going to get wheeled before the courts again as a witness. So he will be exiting the witness protection program at the same time as he's exiting the court system. Now, his father has already been released. But we heard in court that his entire family has been put on a protected witness program. His wife, his 4 children, some of whom are grown up, and that they will all be relocated together. Which is a lot of people, and it's costing a hell of a lot of money. You ask questions around the witness protection program, you look for any information of it, and you're stonewalled because of the security, behind it, which is totally understandable, that end of it. But we'll never know how much Jonathan Dowdall has cost the state. It'll be very hard the
broad principle isn't it, that if you're earning a certain amount, if you're earning 40,000 a year and you have your own home, when you get relocated to, say, any other country, that you'd be set up with something equivalent,
Yes.
isn't it? That you wouldn't be allowed. That's to stop people being allowed profit out of it.
That's supposed to be the way it works. But in my experience, certainly in the past, and I don't have any evidence of it in more recent years, but way back when I was looking at it, when Joey O'Callaghan and the likes had been in the programme, there was certainly, they would have claimed that there was financial, they were given financial rewards essentially for their evidence. Some of them, there was no, people were given and promised different amounts of money. Some of them fared off better than others. It was pretty haphazard, and it still isn't enshrined in any legislation, which is the problem with it. I think we're the only country existing with it being so haphazard. I mean, it's simply run by the Crime and Security Division on a budget that the public has no access to seeing, other than we get some figures sometimes, which are...
I think it's overseen by a judge, some sort of what becomes public. But exactly, we don't know, nobody ever gets to see, this is the house Jonathan Dowdall is now living in. Is that value for money? Is it too much, too little? Who knows? We'll never know that.
A lot of people sort of said to me that Jonathan Dowdall would be going back to that house, that he wouldn't be moving away. There's no way that he would. Now, he definitely is in bad health.
Yeah.
And that was evident during the trial. And he was facilitated because of that bad health. I think he has spinal problems. And that is rumoured to be some of the reasons why it's been difficult to relocate him and his family somewhere, because of his health problems. But like, he obviously is going.
Yeah.
He's not staying, because even people close to the sort of the Hutch organisation reckoned that he would just go back to this house.
Yeah.
And, it would all be a ball of smoke, this witness protection and all. Like, other close associates of his are back in town, living quite openly.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, I think there is a huge difference between, people that are innocently associated with Jonathan Dowdall because they have no choice, and the man himself. I think it will be an absolute security nightmare for the Garda as well. I mean, they I'm sure would not like that situation, because of course you can't force anybody to take measures to protect themselves. You can only advise them. Jonathan Dowdall...
Well, they can be signed off the programme if they don't adhere to the rules and regulations on it. And part of those rules would be that you relocate in the aftermath, and not usually to a part of Ireland. Usually it is abroad, and it's where you're offered.
Yeah.
It's not where you choose.
No.
Because of course everyone wants America.
Yeah,
maybe
America,
they don't. Maybe
Australia.
They don't now.
Well, America or Australia, everybody wants.
Canada might seem a little bit more stable, but so like a lot of people on the programme don't want not London, but the UK, because often they're offered kind of,
it's not the swinging centre of London. It'd be Bradford, or no offence to Bradford.
Some of those sort of grimmer northern working class vast towns, and it doesn't seem so appealing. So that's the
state of play.
Would you go up and have a look at it? Should we go up and would they let us?
They might
have a tour.
You're super famous, so I might get away with it, but you wouldn't.
But you would be able to see what a pergola is instead of a shed.
I could.
I'd be able to start.
I'd really have to educate myself,
teaching you a little bit about that.
Yeah.
But look, an interesting story, interesting development, and clearly, I'd say there's a good property opportunity there for somebody, isn't there? I mean, look, this is a family home, and there's no question of it, but nobody is going to target it in the aftermath of this. I mean, this is so high profile that it's for sale, that Dowdall isn't living there. Like, I suppose the point for anybody interested in purchasing it is that, like, the only people that are wanting to target Dowdall know him well and inside out. They are former associates of his. They are former friends of his. He has done the dirty on his own. There's no question, but anybody else living in that house is not going to be mistaken for Dowdall.
No, they're not. And they're not going to hold it against the house.
They're not going to hold it against the house. No. So, I would say if you're interested in buying, go and have a look.
Yeah, and there may even be a little bit of a bargain because of that history.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, we'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Nicola.
I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.